So today I want to talk about one of the characters, or actually a couple of the characters in War and Peace. Not Andre, not Pierre, but Napoleon. And I want to talk about the other historical characters, just a few of them. So Napoleon is a character in War and Peace, not just in terms of he has actions and those are recounted, but we hear him speak. We actually get a few of his inner thoughts at various points. And part of this, part of it is to deflate the figure of Napoleon and kind of set him up for ridicule. But that said, pretty much every leader in the novel is ridiculed for various weaknesses, though, sometimes giving the due respect for specific skills, etc., etc. We're still, this is still 1812, I believe we're in October 1812 on part 13 now, and Napoleon is in Moscow. He's issuing edicts, and they sound great. All of the official proclamations from Napoleon sound fantastic. That said, Tolstoy immediately deflates this by saying what is actually happening in Moscow, in terms of he can't keep good order among his troops. And he keeps hammering home, Tolstoy keeps hammering home, that Napoleon does not control events. And it's not just Napoleon, basically all of the leaders. Tsar Alexander, we have Kutuzov, who is the commander-in-chief of the Russian forces, and then there's Rostopchin, who is the governor of Moscow. And all of them are shown, actually Rostopchin is horrible. And this is a nice lesson for people if you are voting for a mayor or any real executive, and I'm not talking about president, but even governor, but local executives, when you elect them, you really should be electing, forget about party. You need to be electing for actual competence and specifically emergency competence. We can think of what happened with Katrina. Both the governor of Louisiana and the mayor of New Orleans were completely useless in the situation. You can complain about the federal government, but seriously, I can think in New York City too. I was in New York City when I lived there when both Giuliani and Bloomberg were mayors. I got out before de Blasio came in. Competence is really important. Rostopchin was totally incompetent with the removal of the troops from Moscow. Now, it's true, there's only so much he could have controlled. However, there is a scene with Rostopchin where he gets one political prisoner who was likely to have been executed for being a traitor. But rather doing what should have been done, either keeping him under control until you can actually execute him, it wasn't clear to me if he had actually had a trial, etc., or, get your police force to actually execute him. He puts them out in front of a mob and exhorts them to tear this guy apart. And the mob actually doesn't want to do it in the book. So, anyway, I'm just saying none of the leaders come off well at all in the book. I want to comment on this because I'm listening to an audiobook version. It's Frederick Davidson is the reader for Blackstone Audio. He's an excellent reader. He can do, and he uses accents to very good effect in the book. And it's interesting when you hear Napoleon speak, he puts a kind of, it's an odd accent he puts on it, but it's not the same French accent that all of the other French officers you hear speaking, because of course he wasn't originally from France, he was from Corsica, and you hear some of the contempt of some of the French officers for Napoleon being an Italian, and we used to call him Bonaparte all the time, but now we call him Napoleon. The one thing that Tolstoy directly makes fun of Napoleon for is the assumption Napoleon has that everybody admires him. Now, that might work, and it doesn't work for the French officers, but it's really ridiculous when it's captured Russian officers or other Russians in front of him, that they're supposed to admire him. He's shown as an egotist. In his inner thoughts, you have him comparing himself to Alexander the Great, which is amusing because, of course, Alexander the Great, we have been told, used to sleep with a copy or one of the books of the Iliad, papyrus scroll, under his pillow, because he compared himself to Achilles. So it makes one wonder how many of these historical people looked at prior historical great men to compare themselves against. Anyway, nobody comes out looking good. Kutuzov, the commander-in-chief, is presented as an old, decrepit man who is pretty aware that he doesn't control anything, but he really shouldn't be in the position he's in. That when he wins, it's partly by luck, and when he loses, sometimes it's really out of his hands anyway. So, it's continuing the thesis that individual people, doesn't matter, great people have only so much control, especially in war. So that's that one.